interesting to me that there have been several years where AOC has avoided YouTube media. I'm not even going to say independent media anymore because things come popping up and I'm realizing some of these people ain't really independent. But she's avoided that space. She's kind of avoided some of the progressive YouTube shows that she either went on when she was running the very first time or they promoted her along the way. So I look up on YouTube and all of a sudden on my homepage, I see AOC interviewing with the Majority Report. And I said, you know what? Let me check this out because I have a feeling they're going to go very easy on AOC. And they did. Let's go into the first clip here where they are discussing how she lost the leadership position for the Oversight Committee. And I want you to pay attention to something, how AOC says a lot of words without really saying anything. She throws in all these different words, but she's not really answering the questions sometimes. And I want you to see how they are very gentle with her. They handle her very carefully, almost as if she's a fragile, I don't know, a fragile ornament or something. Very carefully with her. And why is that? Let's go into this clip here.
What's been going on this week in terms of your attempt to chair the government oversight committee? And my daughter had a question that sort of dovetails into this. So I told her I would ask this question. She wants to know, and I think sort of these two questions sort of address that whole dynamic. One is if you feel abandoned by the Democratic Party, and how so if you do. But also, she wants to know, how do you grapple with having to appeal to multiple different ideological groups within the Democratic Party and your constituency?
Yeah, well, two really good questions. The first one is that I don't really feel abandoned by the Democratic Party because my primary relationship that I care about the most is mass movements and mass movement politics. And
pause. See, we already got to stop. Here's the thing. She does not care about trying to get along with different parts of the Democratic Party tent because she's one of them. It's not like she's like on the outside. We can point to someone like Cori Bush and say, Cori Bush, they really kind of shunned her. They really did. And I mean, within the Democratic Party, they really kind of shunned Cori Bush. At one point, I was told Cori Bush's office wasn't even allowed to speak. But AOC is one of them. She's voted in ways that they wanted her to vote, which we'll get to that in a little bit during this segment. But what are you talking about? She goes on to say that she's focused on mass movements. What mass movement were you a part of? What mass movement was AOC a part of? Let me know. Because even when it comes to the pro-Palestinian marches that happen all across the world, don't forget that protesters had to confront AOC in her face to get her to condemn it, to get her to call it a genocide. They had to do that. As many of those marches that happened in DC, I don't remember seeing AOC at any of those marches. Her and Cori Bush, they gave a little speech outside the White House at one point, but I don't remember seeing her in any of those marches. What movement was she a part of? When we had the Medicare for All marches in this country, 3 years ago now? And the organizers reached out to squad members like AOC. Where was AOC? She was not at any of those marches. She was campaigning with Nina Turner. She was not there. There were marches in over 50 cities across the country. Was not there. Again, what movement, what mass movement was she a part of? Because they're not going to ask her that. You know what I mean? It's just very simple right there.
Part of my job and my role exists forever in this tension point between mass movements and everyday people and the establishment of the Democratic Party. And so that is always like, as long as I exist as a person, I am going to be in this waypoint between these two forces. And what I'm always trying to do is open the windows of possibility for people in the Democratic Party. And so I don't feel abandoned because my job is not to try to gain personal acceptance. My job is to try to build power for the working class.
You don't feel abandoned because you decided to join them. You decided to go along with them. She's not trying to make didn't she try to make a personal relationship with Nancy Pelosi? Didn't she try to get along with Nancy? Didn't she change her position from protesting in her office to going onto The View and saying she's Mama Bear? That's Mama Bear right there. You don't mess with. And Mama Bear stabbed you in the back. Because the reason why so many people voted against her for that position, for the leadership of the Oversight Committee, is because Nancy Pelosi told them to. So now she's trying to pretend like she never tried to go along with anybody in the Democratic Party. And the thing is, Emma and Sam know this. Emma and Sam know what AOC has been doing. And they just sit there because they want to maintain access. And that's what this is really about. They don't want to push back on AOC the way that many of the rest of us would, because they want to continue to have access to AOC. There's a reason why she's on their show and she's not on anyone else's show. Of all the things that AOC has done throughout 2024, whether it's the way that she has voted, whether it's the webinar that she did where she conflated Zionism with anti-Semitism, whether it has been the way that she has criticized and bashed people who wanted to vote third party and didn't want to vote for an administration that was a part of a freaking genocide. After everything that she has done just this year, we didn't even go back to the other years, okay? Because we can go all the way back to the Iron Dome votes. We can go all the way back to that, the Capitol Police vote. We can go all the way back. But just this year alone, there is no way that if AOC comes onto your show, you should be soft with her at this point in time. But AOC knows that they're going to be that way. That is why she's there. There's no way. There is no way at this point in time anyone can seriously sit up here and buy what this woman is saying. And I get so frustrated because I'm sick of this. I'm sick of the bullshit. You can't tell me that you can't, after everything that this woman has done, that you don't understand what AOC is trying to do. AOC is looking out for herself. Looking out for herself. You want to talk about being a part of the working class and helping the working class movement. AOC didn't even endorse Cori Bush, fam. These are the things that people forget. AOC didn't even endorse Cori Bush. So let's not even go to, you know what I'm saying? It's not just about the way that she voted on that anti-Semitism bill. That's one thing. That's one thing. There are all these other things that she has done. And I'll tell you this as someone who lives here in Massachusetts. I want to be very clear. You don't get an internship with Ted Kennedy just because you're good in school, just because you have good grades. Those internships with senators are very hard to get. And you can be a straight A student at Boston University, honey, and not get that position. You following me here? Pay attention to this.
And so I feel like you have to know when to select your battles and when to force the question. And I ran to win. I always run to win. I don't pick fights that I think are losing from the jump, even if they are long shots. But I also felt like this was a win-win situation. And I felt like it was win-win because you win it in a literal sense. We're able to wield this seat. And I think I genuinely ran because I thought it was what was best for the party. And I think it was what was best for the country, and I think it was what was best for people, and that's why I did it. But I also think that it is clarifying. And sometimes when you force this question, it allows us to take measurements about where we are at, and not in a binary perspective, not just in a binary perspective either. It's not just that we won or that we lost, but even in losing, I don't think anybody in the party thought that it would be this close at the start. This is a race among, by definition, Democratic insiders, only among other members of Congress. And this is typically an environment where people like us get crushed. And the fact that it was this close, the fact that some of the most, established and powerful elements of the party had to mobilize to make this result, happen, that we, people were hot on their heels, I think is a very good sign for us.
It's a very good sign for her, because the reason why it was that close, that shows that AOC has become that much like the establishment Democrats. That's why. That is why it was that close. Because they are seeing her go further and further away from her grassroots base, go further and further away from the socialism, from the democratic socialism. Don't forget that DSA unendorsed her this time around. Now, the New York chapter of DSA continued to endorse her. They're suspect as hell, though. We can go into that another time. But National DSA, don't forget, they issued a statement explaining why they unendorsed her, going against the railroad workers, conflating anti-Zionism with anti-Semitism. There were a number of things that they listed in their statement as to why they decided to remove their endorsement for AOC. So there are a number of things that have happened with her that now pushes her closer to the establishment Democrats and away from this Bernie Sanders progressive base. That's why it was that close. She's not going to tell you that, though. But this is where Sam and Emma should come in and say what I just told you.
And so that's the first question, which leads to the second question, right, is that in order for us to win, we need to win along several dimensions. And we need to know how to bring people together and cleave people together in kind of different dimensions in addition to an ideological one.
This is an example of her saying a lot of things without really saying much. Different dimensions, not an ideological one. Let me just go ahead and sum up what she's really saying, because what she'll do is she'll use these different terms so that it's kind of like, oh, okay, well, yeah, she knows what she's talking about. No. What AOC is really saying to you is that under this big tent of the Democratic Party, instead of holding the line on progressive issues, even though you ran on it and you said that you would, what she's trying to tell you is she's going to go along with what the big tent wants. Okay. See how quickly I said that? See how quickly I was able to say that? And she's taking all this time and going all the way around the world to tell you what I just told you. That's what she's telling you. When she says things like, we got to figure out how to pick our battles. It's all about strategy. We got to be strategic. They always come with that, by the way. When you criticize how they voted or what they're doing, it's all about strategy. Honey, it'll be 15 years down the road. They'll still be talking about strategy. And the only thing that will change is that she will advance in her career. Everybody else will still be broke. If you're broke now, you'll probably be broke 15 years from now, unless somebody give you some help. Because it's hard to get out of a cycle of poverty. That's what she's really trying to say to you. We're going to go to another part here that I want you to see as well. Watch this. Listen to this part when we get into Is this the Israel part? I think this is the Israel part. Listen to this.
Because frankly, there are votes that I know that my daughter and I have talked about, and that we've talked about here, that you've taken that we're not excited about, to say the least. The anti-Semitism one in the most recent. But this is part, or you tell me, is this part of like the idea of there are certain battles where you think are maybe less consequential in the long term that you will sacrifice to build these coalitions for the long term?
Now, let me tell you what Sam just did here. Instead of telling AOC to her face, you voting the way that you did on that anti-Semitism bill is not okay. That was a bill that was pro-censorship. And you can't sit up here and say that you're for the Palestinian cause, but then you're voting in such a way on legislation that benefits AIPAC, that benefits the ADL, that benefits, obviously the state of Israel. You can't do that. Now, he should have said to her what I said. He could even said it a different way. Could have said it in a different way. The way that he frames it is, people like my daughter may not have been happy about the way that you voted on some things like the anti-Semitism legislation. Are you saying that this could be part of, a strategic effort for some type of coalition and da-da-da? And he's saying it in that way so that he can continue to bring her back on the show, instead of telling her to her face that what she did was wrong. You see, if these shows like the Majority Report, if they're not going to hold these politicians accountable, then they're no better than corporate media. They're no better than CNN, Fox News, MSNBC. If you're not going to hold them accountable, you're no better than them. And what I have noticed has happened over the time is that, particularly when it comes to politicians, we'll just keep it with the politicians, particularly when it comes to politicians, a lot of these shows that say they're independent, etc., on YouTube, they will say one thing on their show about what this politician did. But then when the politician is on their show, they never express it to them that way, because they want to continue to maintain access. So Sam Cedar, the way that he said this to her, he's actually helping her answer the question. So are you saying that this is a part of, a broader coalition? You want to be strategic? Da-da. He's helping her. Does everyone not see this? They are helping her. There's no way that AOC cannot sit on your show right now with everything that she has done in the past 2 years, and you do not confront her on what she has done and don't frame it as a question. You tell her what she did was wrong. There's no way. I thought Emma and Sam, I thought you're supposed to be pro-worker. These people pro-worker, why you should have went ham on her about the railroad workers. You should have went ham, not this. Oh, so are you saying that? Come on, man.
I think that we are presently in a moment where we have to be really ruthless about what battles we pick, and we cannot pick all of them. And I think we have to be realistic about the political moment that we are in. There are moments where we have the juice to be bullish. And then there are moments where we need to like really strengthen foundationally and preserve. This was a tough year for us. And it's not just about big money. It's about like organizationally on the left, we are in a challenging time. Just everything that has gone on over the last year, there's a genocide that is happening.
There is a genocide that is happening. And to the point that she made prior to that, she said we have to be, strategic. We have to pick our battles, basically. And we're not going to be able to go to battle for everything. She keeps saying we, but she's talking about herself. It's like that friend that everyone has that, you're hanging out with your friends and there's always that one friend that says, well, they say that drinking a 16 16-ounce cup of coffee is actually an overdose of caffeine, you know? And nobody ever asked that friend, like, who's they? They're talking about themselves sometimes. So she's talking about herself. She keeps using the word we, but she's talking about herself. She's telling you that she is not going to be able to fight these battles. She's telling you that she is going to pick certain ones and the other one she's not going to pick. Then after she says that, she mentions the genocide. So let's talk about picking battles. If there's one battle that you should have picked, it was the damn genocide. I mean, how worse do you get than that? How worse do you get to that? Did she pick that battle? No, she had to be pushed into calling it a genocide by protesters when they confronted her to her face. And she yelled at the protesters, "You guys are not helping. She stood on the stage at the Democratic National Convention and she lied to all of you and told you Kamala Harris and Joe Biden are working tirelessly around the clock for a ceasefire, only to get called out by one of her own comrades, Ilhan Omar, who said she was lying. And she was. So when it comes to picking battles, you mean to tell me that a genocide wasn't an important battle? That it was just crumbs? Because when it came to picking that battle, what did she do? She went along with Democrat leadership. She went along with Democrat establishment. She sat down and did a damn webinar talking about Zionism and anti-Semitism, Zionism and Judaism, and conflating it all together. She sat right there and did that webinar and did all of that. So she apparently doesn't think that's a battle that you should try to pick. A genocide. So stop saying we and start saying you. Because Rashida Tlaib, Cori Bush, and Ilhan Omar voted against that anti-Semitism bill. AOC voted for it. AOC voted against actually the railroad workers to be able to go on strike. Rashida Tlaib voted for the workers. So stop it with the we. It's you. And Sam Cedar knows this.
And this is rightfully been a focus of so much organizing. And it's also caused a lot of not just internal, I think, questioning, assessment, how we do things on the left, but it's also been a moment where we've had tons of dark money, not just, yes, APAC, also crypto, also Wall Street, all these folks that are constantly waiting to pick us off. And so, I think that for this purpose, when we make sure that we fight like hell on the material things, like I vote consistently on withholding weapons, withholding funding for offensive weapons. When it comes to some of like the finer, second and third degree connections on condemning anti-Semitism, if IHRA came explicitly to the floor, I would not vote to ratify it. But I think.
But you voted for it. You wouldn't vote to ratify it, but you voted for the legislation. So why would she do that, ladies and gentlemen? Because she wants to have an end with Dem leadership. That's why. She voted the same way that they voted for it. I told you the three people who voted against it: Rashida Tlaib, Cori Bush, and Ilhan Omar. She voted along with Dem leadership because that's the club she wants to be a part of. So if you tell Sam and Emma, if it were to come to the floor, oh, I would vote against it, but you voted for the legislation because you want to be along with Dem leadership, because you're trying to appease them. So when she says she's not trying to appease people, that's bullshit. The majority of politicians in Congress are trying to appease somebody, damn it, or they're gone. The majority of politicians, whether they're Democrats, whether they're Republicans, they're trying to appease somebody or they are gone. So that in itself is a lie. And they just eat it up.
That we need to be very strategic. We cannot swing at every single pitch because we have to build. And so I do think, for example, internally, one of my big cases about in gaining support, and what is interesting is that the support that we got in this, it was not just like the Progressive Caucus plus the Hispanic Caucus, which were the two caucuses that endorsed me in this fight. We had swing district Democrats that supported me in this. We had New Dems, which is a
Pat Ryan, I think, was one of the most successful the swing, sort of purple districts, as it were.
Oh my God. Right. Because they're supporting you because you're becoming like them, because you became like them. There's one more part here that I want you to see, and that's when he brings up Gaza. And this is the part to me where I felt like it was definitely a missed opportunity. Sam Cedar mentions Gaza to AOC. He doesn't ask anything about the working tirelessly for a ceasefire remark. He doesn't ask her about conflating Zionism with Judaism. There's a reason why she's not on shows that will hold her accountable. They won't critique her. They want access. This was the perfect opportunity for him to bring up what I've been talking about. Listen to this. It's his question.
Just lastly, because I know you got to go, but part of this dynamic of the way that young people are getting their media now, it seems to me, is that what we've seen with Gaza and what's happening with Israel is akin, in my mind, to what happened with the Vietnam War, when we saw for the first time reporters were actually involved in the war. And for people who had more skin in the game, insofar as like I could get drafted or my kids could get drafted, that really changed the politics in a way that I don't think the upper echelon or the old guard, as it were, of whatever was happening at that time in this country understood. And I feel like that same dynamic is happening now. If you're under the age of 40, what's gone on in Israel is in Palestine and Gaza in particular, obviously, and the West Bank for that matter, is very different from your perception if you're over the age of 40 because of where you get your media.
I have said this directly.
So he brought up Gaza, didn't mention anything about the lie that she told about working tirelessly for a ceasefire. I don't know what's going on here. Emma looked tired. Sam looked like he's just, oh God, please come back to the show. Oh God, please come. I mean, this is just, it's sad. It's really sad. And I have to tell you something. If I would have known, back during the Bernie campaigns, if I would have known that this is what would become of the so-called progressive movement, I would have sat at home. If I would have known that this is what would have happened with AOC and the other members of the squad, Ayanna Pressley, who was in my district at that time, if I would have known that this is what to become, I would have sat at home. If I would have known that these hosts would have sat there and not held these people accountable, I would have sat at home. I would have never given money to Bernie Sanders. I would have never donated to any of the members of the squad. I would have sat my butt on the couch. That's it. And it's really sad. Doesn't ask her anything about that. This woman lied to everybody. You mention Gaza, don't mention the working tirelessly for a ceasefire. I wouldn't be surprised if he had to give her these questions in advance. But this is what she says.
The Democratic leadership, I've communicated this to the White House, that this is our Vietnam. This is our, not just like in terms of the party, but this is just our country's Vietnam. And what I think a lot of people do not yet understand is they think that some of these hemorrhages are maybe ideological. They think maybe it is like an ethnic thing. I don't think there is appreciation yet about how generationally radicalizing this moment is, and how shocked people are at how far just like the general inertia is willing to go, as if we're not seeing what's happening right before our very eyes. I mean, we are now at the point where, in where I exist, me calling this a genocide, going to the House floor, delivering a speech saying that the administration is aiding and abetting this is so far beyond the fringe, so far beyond the pale. This is also part.
You go to the House floor and say that this administration is aiding and abetting this, and then you shame people for not wanting to support that same administration. So as far as I understand, this whole idea of I'm in the middle between the movement and, you know, what's happening in DC and all that kind of stuff, what that means is that she's going to walk the damn line. So you can miss me with all that. You go on the House floor and you say, oh, this is a genocide. We must stop this, da, da, da. But then you literally shamed people. If you would have kept your mouth shut, a lot of people wouldn't have said anything. This woman went on Instagram and all over Twitter shaming people for not wanting to support Kamala Harris, not wanting to support the genocide administration. That's the problem a lot of people had with you. If you would have just kept your mouth shut, a lot of people probably wouldn't have came at you. But no, you had to go there. You had to shame people who wanted to support candidates that were against this genocide and called it out, and rightfully so, and don't take money from AIPAC, unlike the people that you told everyone to support. You know, the Democratic Party is a lost cause. And I've said this before. When it comes to the Black community, everybody else, you know, people can make their own decision. But I said when it comes to the Black community, the Democratic Party is not doing anything for you. This so-called squad or progressive movement, whatever it was, is not doing anything for the Black community. What happened is a bunch of people went into Congress. They decided that it would be better for them to go along with Dem leadership instead of doing this hostile takeover of the Democratic Party, which is the way Justice Democrats was advertised, by the way. And that's what they've decided to do. And when you decide to not do for the people or the constituents don't owe you anything. The people don't owe you a vote. They don't owe you a smile. They don't owe you a wink and a nod. Hey guys, this was a Sabby clip. If you like what you saw, hit that like button and subscribe.